Martian warriors, digital despots, cowardly barbarians, and cyborg pirates are just a few of the interesting Disney characters you may have missed by skipping these fabulous flops. Treasure Planet is a science fiction-infused adaptation of the Robert Louis Stevenson classic Treasure Island, tweaked for a new audience. It came out in 2002, less than a year before the first Pirates of the Caribbean movie hit theaters. But while the latter made a huge splash, Treasure Planet sank big time. With a massive budget of $140 million, Disney poured a lot into this swashbuckling epic, blending computer animation with traditional animation in order to create a unique look. Moviegoers weren't biting. The film made less than $110 million worldwide, and the initial plans for a sequel were cancelled. Even though Treasure Planet wasn't a box office success, the film itself is actually pretty incredible. Not only did Disney's efforts pay off on the screen, but the exciting characters and complex world building make this one of the most unique projects the studio has ever put together. And it's the most original Treasure Island adaptation out there. The friendship between Jim Hawkins, voiced by Joseph Gordon-Levitt, and John Silver, voiced by Brian Murray, really solidifies this picture. But there's a lot more to the movie than meets the eye. If you've never seen it, there's never been a better time to check it out.
What are you looking at, weirdo?
Yeah, weirdo.
Back when 3D animation was still being perfected, we got films like Ice Age and Robots. While those are pretty well known, 2007's Meet the Robinsons didn't fare quite as well. This $150 million adventure generated less than $170 million at the box office, which wasn't the return on the investment that Disney was hoping for. Meet the Robinsons was meant to help usher the studio into the new digital age, but it went the way of so many other Disney sci-fi flicks, failing big time. But just because something isn't a financial success, that doesn't mean it's not worthy of your attention. The film is centered around a 12-year-old inventor called Louis, an orphan who gets whisked off into the year 2037 by a time-traveling boy named Wilbur. It's heartfelt, charming, and an absolute blast, which really makes it a bit of a mystery as to why it flopped in the first place. Maybe the fact that the animation of the day wasn't quite able to create convincing human characters had something to do with it. Or maybe people just didn't quite get the concept. Its failure is even harder to understand when you consider the fact that many top critics were singing its praises. Richard Roeper called it a lot of fun, while Lou Lemieux of the New York Post called it a delightful, quirk-filled riff on Back to the Future. Created by pulp novelist Edgar Rice Burroughs in the early 1900s, the fantastical world of Barsoom has captivated the hearts and minds of countless readers. But it took almost a full century for big-screen adaptations to appear. While the smaller studio adapted A Princess of Mars in 2009 for a direct-to-DVD feature, Disney took the epic to the big screen in 2012 with John Carter. The film cost them a whopping $307 million to put together. But a weak and confusing marketing campaign tore the whole thing apart. With a box office return of $284 million, the studio lost a ton of money on the ambitious project. It even led to Walt Disney Studios chairman Rich Ross resigning. But at the end of it all, John Carter is actually pretty good.
You are ugly, but you are beautiful.
The film stars Taylor Kitsch in the title role, and is genuinely a lot of fun. It manages to capture the source material fairly well, even with a few minor changes. Sure, there are a couple of dull moments in there, but it doesn't change the fact that Kitsch was well cast in the lead role. And he does a great job, all things considered. Whether you're familiar with the original novels or not, John Carter is an adventure that's well worth revisiting today. It contains some fantastic world building, has a distinctive style, and features a unique combination of Western and sci-fi aesthetics. It deserved to get a sequel, but the money involved meant that was never gonna happen. Disney has also suffered a few TV flops in recent years. Among these is 2012's Tron Uprising, an animated series set between the events of the original Tron and 2010's Tron Legacy. The show actually went into production before Legacy hit theaters, but because it took so long to make, it didn't come out until after the film had dropped. By then, Tron Legacy wasn't the huge hit that Disney hoped for, leaving question marks over the future of the franchise. It wasn't surprising when a planned second season of Uprising was abandoned, even though the first season is actually very good. Bruce Boxleitner returns to voice Tron, but this time as a kind of mentor. He shapes a young program named Beck, played by Elijah Wood, into a new Tron so they can battle Clue's dark forces. The show is a blast, and despite airing on Disney XD, it actually tackles some mature themes. As well as being a gripping story, it's a real feast for the eyes, boasting a unique animation style. Disney execs weren't sold, but fans loved it. Tron Uprising has a 92% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. The George Clooney-led Tomorrowland actually grossed more than its $190 million budget, but the film still fell far short of expectations, losing anywhere between $120 to $150 million when it all was said and done. The Brad Bird-directed sci-fi flick didn't go down well with critics or audiences, receiving lukewarm reviews across the board. Bird confirmed to The Wrap, "For whatever reason, it didn't hit the way we wanted it to hit." He also lamented the fact that original movies often face an uphill battle compared to reboots and franchise installments. So what went wrong exactly? The film's optimistic look toward the future contrasts deeply with our modern thoughts on climate change, artificial intelligence, and political divisions. But that was kind of the point. To build a better tomorrow, the film argues that we also need to hope for one.
In every moment, there is the possibility of a better future, but you people won't believe it.
Tomorrowland is a little heavy-handed with its message, but the film's charismatic cast, beautiful cinematography, and hopeful story propels it forward. More than anything, it's a movie that might make you long to be a kid again. The animated comedy Dave the Barbarian seemed to constantly be on Toon Disney in the mid-2000s, but then all of a sudden it vanished. Set during the Middle Ages, the show follows the adventures of Dave and his two sisters, who are left to manage their kingdom of Ujogoth while their parents are away fighting evil. Dave is left in charge of physically protecting the realm, while his oldest sister Candy is left to call the shots, even though she'd rather be out shopping than making important decisions. The bravest of the bunch is Dave's younger sister, Fang. This hilarious show had everything from casual fourth wall breaks to sinister talking pigs. It took the general Conan the Barbarian concept and flipped it on its head, making Dave a cowardly character. From the start, Dave the Barbarian didn't have the biggest budget to work with, but the writers always found clever ways to work around their limitations. It's hard to tell exactly what killed the series, but there are those who are still mourning its loss 2 decades later. Just before the entire world shut down in the face of the pandemic, Disney and Pixar released Onward to theaters, with Chris Pratt and Tom Holland voicing 2 elf brothers on a quest to bring their father back to life. It seems like this movie was destined to be a success. Unfortunately, circumstances beyond the film's control prevented it from gaining much traction, and it ended up making $142 million, a significant amount less than its budget. Those figures aren't surprising given the global situation at the time. But it's a shame considering how good this movie actually is. Thankfully, when Onward was released to home audiences, it began to receive the recognition it deserved. Pratt and Holland are an inspired pair here, and the unique blend of real-world aesthetics with the fantasy genre makes Onward stand out as a noteworthy addition to Pixar's resume. Some commenters called it Frozen for boys. It's certainly just as fun, and it has an ending that will bring you to tears. If you've been sleeping on this one, we recommend adding it to your watch list immediately. One of Disney's most notorious flops, 1985's The Black Cauldron, was the most expensive animated project that the studio had ever put together at the time, partially because it was the first to use computer-assisted imagery. The movie is based on Lloyd Alexander's novel of the same name, which is part of his Chronicles of Prydain series. The film cost a reported $44 million to make, and while that might not seem like a lot of money for a movie these days, that was no small chunk of change in 1985. Ultimately, it only pulled in about $21 million during its theatrical run, making it a resounding failure. The Black Cauldron ended up being just too dark for Disney, but it could have been even darker. In the years since it came out, some legitimately disturbing deleted images have been unearthed, including a scene where henchmen have their skin melted in graphic fashion. Things like this are why The Black Cauldron became a cult classic after being released on home video. It's a fantasy epic that boasts an unusually terrifying villain in the Horned King, and a generally somber atmosphere, setting it apart from other animated Disney films.
Now I call on my army of the dead. The Cauldron Born.
It may have been a flop at the time, but it rightfully lives on in the hearts and minds of dark fantasy aficionados everywhere. 2022's Lightyear was meant to evoke the 90s sci-fi blockbusters that a young Andy from Toy Story would have watched growing up. Sadly, Lightyear ended up crashing and burning, making just $226 million against a $200 million budget. Fans just weren't interested. Perhaps some were mad that Tim Allen wasn't returning as Buzz Lightyear, or maybe some were disappointed that the film didn't follow the already established Buzz Lightyear of Star Command animated series. According to Pixar's chief creative officer Pete Docter, the lack of other recognizable Toy Story characters was probably to blame. Docter told The Wrap, "I think probably what we've ended on in terms of what went wrong is that we asked too much of the audience. When they hear Buzz, they're like, great, where's Mr. Potato Head and Woody and Rex? And then we drop them into this science fiction film that they're like, what? If you go into this film not expecting it to be another Toy Story film and simply take it for what it is, you'll have a blast." Another Disney animated series from the early 2000s that's worth a second look is Fillmore, a hybrid of a 70s cop show and a middle school drama. Created by future The Walking Dead showrunner Scott Gimple, Fillmore originally ran on ABC before moving to Toon Disney. In many ways, the 70s cop drama theme was probably too mature for its younger audience, but not mature enough for those who grew up with the shows like Kojak and The Rockford Files. Time has actually been kind to Fillmore, and today it seems like a crime that it only got 26 episodes. From its memorable opening that primes you for a new adventure to the hilarious cop show caricatures that make up each of the main characters, the show shouldn't work, but it absolutely does. On paper, it's a ridiculous idea, but that's exactly what makes it special. Watching these middle schoolers act as if they're in a hard-boiled crime drama is both funny and engaging. You can't help but root for the gang, hoping that they'll catch the latest vandal or cheater in their midst.